Hello and welcome back to Cognautics, your one-stop shop for IT and computer science. As we left it last time, we'd read through an example of a question that you might get in the legal, moral, ethical and environmental impacts of IT. Quite a mouthful and quite a difficult question. And we'd looked at this battle plan that consists of 9 steps. So let's do a walkthrough, talk-through of how you might go about doing this with the question that I've already provided you. Step 1. Read the question. Read it twice, read it deliberately, read it slowly to make sure that it stands a good chance of going into your head. So here's the question. Cognautics Limited designs self-driving electric cars. They've created an e-taxi that can do the work of 5 taxis at half the cost of manned petrol cars. Discuss, this sounds familiar to you, the environmental, legal, cultural and ethical implications of this development. Take some time to read this again and then go on to the next step. Your second step is to highlight the key points, and this is an exercise in abstraction and decomposition. We want to cut this down to its simplest form to highlight only the parts that we need concern ourselves with for the question. So have a go at that now, pause the video, and then once you've highlighted the key parts, go on to the next bit. So I thought the idea that self-driving was important as distinct from electric. I can see the self-driving would involve people and that electric is going to involve, or not people, but it'll impact people, and electric is going to involve environmental concerns. Then we've got the notion that it's the work of 5 taxis, so you've got efficiency there at half the cost, so there's an economic impact of manned, again, people, petrol cars, environment. And then you've got the usual environmental, legal, cultural and ethical. Bear in mind, I wrote this question, but it's a really cut down version. Often the questions the exam boards write are much longer, and it's a little bit more of a job for you to make sure you pick out the parts that are relevant for you to sort of give a good answer. All right, so now that we have highlighted that, you need to then focus on writing the question in its simplest form. Now, you don't need to write this out in the exam. I don't think you've really got time. And I don't think it's necessary once you've done the highlighted part. But just for this exercise, try writing out the question in 1 sentence, because that way it's much easier to pick out what you actually need to do. So have a go at that now. Well, I had a crack at this, and this was my best effort. Discuss the legal, cultural, environmental and ethical impacts of self-driving e-taxi does the work of a manned petrol taxi at half the cost. Those are the salient details on which you need to focus. So that's step 3. We've now refined this question. We know exactly what it's asking us, which helps us then move forward to the next part, which is chopping up that question into paragraph headings. Because once we know what the paragraph headings are, then we can do our brainstorming and drop our answers into the right paragraph headings. So why don't you try and create 1-word paragraph headings for writing 4, 5, 6 paragraphs for this essay question. Have a go at that now. So I think this was quite straightforward really. We've obviously got the environmental, legal, ethical and cultural element here, and I've also added stakeholders as well, because I'm thinking about taxi drivers and manufacturers, so it's a good opportunity to bring those into the question. The exam board are often quite explicit about the stakeholders that they want you to discuss, or if they don't, the stakeholders is a good way of drawing more paragraphs and being able to actually argue both sides more cogently. So remember, stakeholders can be your friend when you're trying to plan this essay. All right, so that's section 4. We've divided that up quite nicely. The next part is the brainstorming, where you actually generate these ideas, and you're going to need to do this in an organized, orderly way. I recommend that once you end up with maybe 4 or 5 paragraph headings, you actually try and brainstorm with each of them for 20 seconds. Just give yourself some time to generate some ideas and do 1 heading at a time. Jot the ideas down, and by the way, don't cross them out. Leave all of this on the page, so if you do run out of time or you forget to put something into your essay, the marker will look at your work and they will try to award you marks where they can, because they do try to give you marks rather than take them away. So leave it on the page. The worst thing it can do is make you no marks, but if you're lucky, it could generate some extra marks. All right, so have a go at the brainstorming now. Take a minute to do that, pause the video and see what you come up with. Well, here's my effort. Sorry about the yellow handwriting. I came up with the idea of a loss of jobs. I'm thinking about taxi drivers there. I had some safety concerns about the software that would be in the self-driving car, because the software will have to be designed to decide who to save or who not to save in the case of an accident. I'm thinking pedestrians versus the occupants of the taxi. Deciding on whether to knock down old or young people, for example. What about the occupants? Would they be safe from the taxi being hacked and they might get tracked? And thinking about the background of the programmer, what impact could that have on how the programming is done? Could the taxi be crashed, for example, if it was hacked? The loss of human touch, so the loss of a taxi driver who might know where to go and know the local area, that would be gone if you had a self-driving car. And then you've got the digital divide, always a big friend with these sorts of questions. Try and weave it in there, the digital divide, the social divide, those who have not, those who can access, those who can't access the taxi. Maybe if you live in rural areas, there won't be as many e-taxis available, so it'll cost you more to use a traditional taxi. Perhaps you need specific hardware like an up-to-date smartphone to access the e-taxi and special software. So considerations there. And then the manufacturers was the last thing I came up with. Those who make the e-taxis, the drivers, the impact on them, and these are the people here, the governments who could make money, the customers who might save money or it might be more expensive for them, electric, better thing for the environment, the manufacturers will do well, but then there's the energy and the raw materials used to make the taxis, precious metals, good one to weave in with the environment, workers' rights depending upon whereabouts the taxis are being made, and the supply chain. So I've got a few things buzzing around there as my brainstorm, and that's what I came up with first of all, and that was about 90 seconds work on that brainstorm. So the next step is for us to categorize things. You've got your brainstorming ideas. Let's try and drop those brainstorming ideas into the paragraph headings we've already written, or draw lines connecting these ideas to your paragraph headings. Then you get a sense of how complete your answer already is. Now, if you've missed out parts, maybe go back and try brainstorming on one of those paragraph headings again. But for those 5 or 6 headings you pulled out, have you got something in there for all of them? If you do, go on to the next step. Have a go at that now and see if you can draw lines between your brainstorming ideas and the paragraph headings that you've already made. Okay, so this was me, and I've got my environmental, legal, ethical, cultural, my stakeholders. I've got 5 ideas there, maybe each worth sort of a mark and a half each. We'll look at arguing the other side of it later on. And thinking about linking it back to the scenario. But I've now dropped my ideas into each of these different categories, so I can see that my essay is now starting to take shape. And all I'm going to have to do is make sure that I've covered the scenario, that I've argued both sides, and we're almost there. Right, so step 7 is linking it. I need to link my answer to the context. I can't simply write about the carbon footprint, or I can't write about collecting taxes, or I can't write about the digital divide. I've got to link it back to the scenario. That's really important, and that is in that top mark band. That's in the marking guidance. So have you managed to link it across at least 2 paragraphs? 3, ideally. If you haven't, go and look for more links. But if you have, you can go on to the next step. So have a go at that now and see if you can look back at your brainstorming ideas and link them to what you've already created. And then go on to the next step once you've done that. So here were my ideas, my brainstorming ideas. In blue, I've added where I've been able to link it back to the scenario. So for example, responsibility for accidents, is it the e-taxi owner or the manufacturer of e-taxis? What about loss of jobs, the drivers of taxis losing their jobs? And retaining, what about the end of a driver's career? If they're having their taxi cab taken away after 20 or 30 years driving, their chances of retraining are going to be quite limited. It's going to be much harder for them. What about the hacking of e-taxis? Now, I haven't simply dropped the word e-taxi in here, but I'm trying to bring it back to the scenario at every possible opportunity. The lack of human touch. And that means that you can talk about the human touch of taxi drivers, knowing the local area, knowing shortcuts, knowing where's safe to go and where's not safe to go, knowing where a good restaurant is. So I can bring that into my question. Again, linking it back to the scenario. We've also talked about manufacturers of the new taxis, about the taxi firms, thinking about stakeholders and the implications for them, and the manufacturers of traditional taxis. So I think I've pretty much done well here. I think I've linked this back to the scenario in many different ways and across the different paragraph headings that I've chosen. So the next thing to do is to look at the sides. Have I argued both sides of each point? And have you done this in at least 2 paragraphs? Now, admittedly, the 2 paragraphs thing I'm slightly making up because it could be 2, it could be 3. But as I mark these essays, if someone has shown the both sides at least twice, it means they're doing it. And for me, they get into that top mark band, which is what this is all about. So have a go at that and see if you can give different sides, argue the pros and the cons for both sides of several items inside your essay so far. Okay, so let's start off and look at electric. Electric cars, better for the environment, but if the energy comes from fossil fuels, then that also increases the carbon footprint. What about the old taxis being recycled? Yes, the new taxis could be greener, but what's going to happen to the old taxis? Precious metals being lost forever, that sort of thing. And we've talked about the loss of jobs of taxi drivers, but self-driving cars will be safer and result in fewer road deaths. Self-driving taxis don't drink and drive, they don't speed, they don't do all those sorts of stupid things. So ultimately, fewer people are going to lose their lives and people will be safer. The sharing economy. These taxis can run 24/7, therefore fewer are required, so they can be run all day, all night, which means you might get picked up more quickly. That means you could be safer. So there's some ideas to think of there. And also, going down, some taxi drivers, there've been some cases where taxi drivers have been involved in criminality, they've attacked people, and they've passed on details. When they pick you up to take you on holiday, they then go and tell criminals that your house is empty. Well, a self-driving car is not going to do that unless they hack into the software. So I think we've got some really good ideas here of arguing both sides of it, the pros and cons of this new development, the e-taxis that are self-driving. Okay, lastly, this comes out to writing out your final draft. By now in the margin, you should have all of these ideas written down. So all you're really doing is just making sure that your spag is good, that it makes sense, and you're dropping it all into place. Use paragraph headings, don't write it as one chunk, it makes it really hard to read. Make it easy for the marker to give you marks by signalling using keywords what you're going to talk about. Environmental, ethical, stakeholders. Label it really clearly so the marker can look through it and say, that's there, that's there, that's there, tick, tick, tick. This person belongs in the top band. So make sure that you've covered the different sides, the context and the headings. Don't cross out your notes, leave them there. You have a go first, try and write out your final answer, and once you've done so, move on and have a look at mine. So I'm not going to read this out to you, you can do that for yourself, just pause it and look through it. This is not a definitive answer, it's what I came up with. However, I think that this would definitely be an 8 out of 8, a 7 out of 8 sort of mark. So this is what you should try to do. And I hope this has been useful for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to be the first to receive new material. Bye-bye.